So what I'd now like to do is hand over to Malcolm and say thank you very much for presenting about next-gen property marketplaces, opportunities and threats.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's great to be back again in Madrid. I'm Malcolm Myers. I have been for 15 years in the area of classifieds and marketplaces. I kicked off as head of M&A of NASPers, or Process as it's now called. I have also been advisor to Scout Group for several years. I run an advisory business that only looks at marketplaces, and we do two things. We help founders raise capital, but it's a little bit later than the pitch club. It's sort of 10 million to 100 million stage. And we do M&A, so we help founders exit, and we also, on the buy side, help PE on some of the larger acquisitions in the classified space. Here are some of our clients. Again, lots of real estate, but also automotive jobs and horizontals. And often it helps being in multiple verticals because you get perspectives and ideas which can then you can cross-fertilize. So today I want to talk about three things. First of all, I'm going to give perhaps a slightly high-speed review of the evolution of classifieds to date. Some of the materials I've mentioned before, and you can always look at the YouTube version from last year, but there's also some new stuff I'm going to take you through. Then I want to really dive down into disruption and how it's affected marketplaces in the past. And then, of course, finish up with what AI might be doing. So let's start with the evolution to date. Now, when you look back 25 years, there are many industries where a lot has happened, right? You think of your iPhone, 25 years ago, Nokia phone, monotone, monochrome, no data, no apps. You move forward to today, and clearly you've got all the pixels you could dream of, 5G, millions of apps, and so on. Or you look at music. We all know the difference between having to buy physical CDs versus having millions of songs available for free. And perhaps one other interesting one, there are a lot of people here who from the travel industry who end up in classifieds. 25 years ago, you'd go to a store, right, a travel agency. You'd have to go through brochures, which probably have been put together 3 or 6 months ago. There'd be a limited choice of flight and hotel combinations. And in terms of actually knowing how the place would be, you wouldn't have a clue, right? You'd have to rely on the goodwill, on the name of the agent. And of course, we scroll forward and think about Booking.com, TripAdvisor. You've got millions of options to bundle, and literally a billion reviews on TripAdvisor. So you're pretty sure what you're going to get. Now, in comparison, you know where this is going. Classifieds, we've seen a little less of a change, I would argue. I'm going to mention Rightmove a lot. I think they're an amazing business, and I'm definitely not picking on them, but they're an excellent example. They were around in 2000, and then the business model was already agents posting listings, paying a subscription, and getting leads of interested buyers for those listings, right? And we go forward 23 years, and it's more or less the same thing. Most classifieds players today are still in the leads and listings business. In fact, for about 2 decades, I would argue, in high GDP markets, so especially the Western world, that's what the evolution of classifieds has simply been about, is providing leads and listings, and then maybe some add-ons to improve the branding and the visibility of certain agents. And even if we go back to just before the pandemic, the focus was on going around the transaction, so adding finance and insurance. And in a way, you think, why? Why hasn't it been more revolutionary? Because, of course, the experience itself is very non-digital. If you think of that wonderful process, click to buy on Amazon, everything coming through payment delivery and so on, classifieds, by definition, you look online and then you're pushed out to physically see an agent, physically communicate with an agent, and eventually, if you do want to transact, it's usually still a very analog, clunky process. So it's not surprising that some while back, some very well-funded companies in America thought, we can completely transform this process. We can make selling your home easy and simple and fast by buying that home for you. And then obviously also on the buy side, it will be that much easier to buy since everything would have been prepared by that same company. As we know, the economics of such a model have not really made it. Opendoor, which is in many respects a very successful company, selling these are unit economics numbers, so selling a home for $400,000 is losing $34,000 on every home, or at least was on average last year. Why? Because they're spending $25,000 on sales and marketing, now the $12,000 on tech and G&A, and $10,000 on financing, and of course that can only go up. They are getting a little better. The losses per home fell down to about 23K if you look at their first half results. Largely, guess how? By simply increasing the margin, so by basically taking more of the buy-sell spread from the seller. So I'm not sure too many of us are going to want to give up 7, 8, 9% of our home sale for that extra simplicity. As we know, most real estate portals today, and there are plenty in the room, most of your money is coming from a very, what I call long-tail agents, a very large number of very small agents. But of course, those agents, much of what they do can be done much better with software. It can be done better, faster, and cheaper with software and data. And you can see here the sort of the open circles are the ones where perhaps the human touch is still important. I'm thinking about viewings, negotiation, and ongoing advice. But everything else, I would argue that if you have the right data, the right software, you can offer a much better service. And I'll come back to this later on. Now, having said that, I've got very excited about tech-enabled brokerages for a while now. Again, they're not delivering when it comes to the numbers, right? So EXP is probably the only one that's just making a little bit of money. Again, these are unit economics. So EXP is making $11 on selling a $365,000 home. So not great business. And then we look at the bigger ones like Compass. They're selling $1 million home, and they're still losing $2,000. Why? Because they're giving away most of that $28,000 commission to agents, and then they're spending about $7,000 on OPEX per home in terms of the marketing and the operations of the business. So today, these businesses are not yet delivering on the economies of scale and the profitability that they need to for their models to work out. And what is interesting is since the pandemic, more classifieds players have been beginning to engage at the core of the transaction, particularly car, where you do have click-to-buy experiences on a number of portals, such as with AutoScout or now Mobile as well. On the real estate side, it's not quite click-to-buy, but there is participation in the transaction. And here you can see on your left, so the models we just talked about, iBuyer and the tech-enabled brokerages. On the right, you can see what classifieds companies have done to get closer into the transaction. On the first quadrant, we have the iBuyer example. Of course, nobody really is doing iBuyer as the classifieds. We know that Zillow, of course, got out of it. There's one example in Turkey where it's still happening. No, so the bulk of innovation has come on commission sharing. Commission sharing is largely on the seller lead side. So in Europe, Meilleur Agent and Mauvais Calf, they're not portals in themselves, but they are parts of course, the big groups, Sologer and ImmoScout, respectively. And they are usually hybrid models, so there is a sort of subscription element, but there's also commission sharing, which I think is important because it means that at some stage, the portals are really becoming part of the transaction. And then the other examples of that are from, so Dubizzle Group, I think Imran will be presenting tomorrow. They have mastered the idea of the portal themselves having a sales force, a paid sales force, who are actually selling new developments and obviously getting a commission for that, and it's, I think, up to 10%. And then Zillow in the US, we'll talk about later on as well. They have been very successful in commission sharing with agents for certain ones of them. And at the bottom of the side here, you have the blue logo is actually Baker in China, which combines the biggest brokerage with a portal, and UI is another example. So that's what's been happening. But look at where it's been happening. Right today, we're in Madrid. If I look in Madrid, there's no real portal itself that is involved deeply in the transaction or in commission sharing. All the examples we can see are happening. US, Latin America, we're going to hear from some of those, I think, as well. And of course, Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia. That's where it's happening. And I think that's very interesting. I think by necessity in some of these markets, agents can't pay commissions, so therefore you have to go, agents can't pay subscriptions, so you have to go onto commission sharing. but I think we'll see that the future will go in this direction. So those are just a few thoughts in terms of what's been happening so far. Now I want to double click on disruption. I've been coming to these conferences for many years, and usually every year there's a new thing around which is going to be disrupting classifieds. If we go back to 2010, it was the web-based horizontal platforms like Le Bon Coin or OLX, who, because they were high liquidity platforms with frequent visits, were likely to be stronger also in the real estate side. In the fact, it didn't quite work out that way because users were often less engaged, the listings quality wasn't necessarily as good, and tech and data challenges made it harder for the same services to be matched. Also, app-based horizontals there, I'm thinking of businesses like Wallapop, which is present here in Spain, or OfferUp. App users are more engaged, and you can offer more sophisticated services, but again, those haven't really taken over from the more traditional web-based portals because they've been more attractive, because the main core property buyers have not been using those platforms. Global verticals, a few years ago, there were some well-funded companies coming out of Berlin who thought that they could apply one platform and roll it out into 30 or 40 countries. Guess what? That didn't work either because most countries had specific local needs which a general platform was not able to adapt to. And then if we move further on, search engines, we've often come to Google as being, can Google be one of those companies that actually takes more of the business away from classifieds? Hitherto, less so, right? It's been more about indexing content than curating and moderating their own. We could see things changing in the future. And then finally, Facebook. We often thought Facebook Marketplace, 2 billion people with a social graph. Could that change the whole property transaction setup? Again, probably not so far because of listings quality, because of functionality, and so on. Finally, we've already talked about the iBuyers. Blockchain and metaverse. Blockchain perhaps could still be a very valid way of trying to make those transactions work in a more digital way. And metaverse could be perhaps a way of helping people to visualize and display properties, but none of them is likely to take over the ecosystem which we are all benefiting from here. So why have classifieds been so resilient? I think the most obvious point is there are network effects. If you do have most of the listings on your platform, and you tend to then get most of the buyers, and then it's very hard for a challenger to show up. By the way, if you look at jobs, this is absolutely not the case, so it's something very special about car and real estate. Secondly, clearly, those large volumes of listings then give you terrific SEO power. Professional sellers are getting often more than half their leads from these platforms, so whatever you do in terms of price increases, they tend to stick around until they can find better places to get such high-quality leads, which they haven't managed to do so far. There's also scope for professionals to advertise and to get more share of voice by spending money on packages, and so on. So I think these are the reasons why it's been so successful. And of course, we've been rewarded financially. It's interesting to see that up until the 30th of September, there's actually been an improvement in market capitalization of the main players. And most players have shown a gain over the past 5 years, apart from perhaps Rightmove. And if we think of revenue multiples, revenue multiple for me is a sign that investors believe that you have a model that will continue to generate strong cash flows, or at least strong revenues in the future, but it's also strong cash flows in the case of classifieds. And you can see here that most are in the sort of 14, 15, 16 times revenue space, including those multiples have actually improved over the past 12 months, interestingly enough. Zillow, why is Zillow punished? Very interesting question. I think they messed up a little bit on their iBuyer model, also perhaps because their model is increasingly a commission-sharing model, and it's interesting whether investors are downgrading or not valuing as highly a commission share than a subscription business. I think they would be wrong to do that. It'll be interesting to see if Zillow now recovers. One final thought here, that how far can the game play on, right? For how long can you continue to raise subscription revenues as a classifieds real estate player? I think if you can see here on the chart, the brown line is 5.8%, 5.5% is the annual increase in property prices in the UK since 2012. And the black line shows you the ARPA of the monthly, the indexed ARPA of Rightmove over the same period, which, as you can see here, has been growing at 9%, or roughly 63% faster. And the question is, can that keep going? Well, if you look at the other chart, you can see on here that if you compare the share of the amount which is spent in a given market, not on just Rightmove, but on the top 3 portals, and you divide that by the total commission pot, so sort of net commission of agents from sales and lettings, in the UK, it's just under 7% is spent on portals. So 7% of the overall revenues on the most important marketing channel doesn't strike me as crazy. I don't see why it couldn't be 10 or 12. And if you look at the other European countries, Germany, France, and Spain, that percentage is much lower. So I think the game can go on, but there's a huge proviso, so long as classifieds remain the main supplier of leads to agents. And that's exactly what might change. So what's AI going to do to this comfortable world that we've been living in for so long? So I know AI has been, it's hard to define when it started, when it came into existence, what exactly AI is, and I won't trouble you too much on that now. But I do think, I think we're going to start, the starting line in my view is really November of last year when ChatGPT went public. And I'd encourage you to think of this quote from Ray Amara, that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate its impact in the longer run. And maybe when we look at travel and the iPhone, maybe those are good examples of where we've probably underestimated quite how much those industries get changed by technology. I'm going to talk about 3 different things: search, discovery, and monetization, and then finish up with a few thoughts and recommendations for classifieds and marketplaces in the world of AI. So the first point to make is search is really important to you guys. You can see here examples of Zillow, 35% of all their visits coming from search, and 31% for Rightmove and so on. So incredibly important. And then Bing, until a few years ago, in fact, until a year and a half ago, I think we sort of almost forgotten about Bing, right? Everything was about Google. Suddenly, Bing has come up with an incredible real estate-specific search. I don't know if you can see it here, but it says Microsoft Bing Real Estate. This is very significant. Microsoft thinks that real estate is going to become something to brand and to showcase and to build on. And then if you look at what you get when you do your search, so I searched for, you can see here, an apartment in Marylebone with 3 bedrooms. And it's extremely good. Now, this is for the UK. France, Spain, it's not quite there yet. But for the UK, you get an incredible number of listings, all exactly within my search parameters. And what's also interesting is that when you click on one of those little price points, what comes up, which is here, is a sort of sub-listing detail where you get 2 options what to click on. Now, most people in this room probably haven't even heard of On the Market. This gives smaller players an opportunity to get much more visibility thanks to Bing. And to the extent that people are going on Bing, this will increase their visibility. It's interesting that there isn't any agent branding here yet. Maybe that can change. And there's also another thing worth noticing. Claim ownership. Why is that there? Well, if it's a for sale by owner listing, then I suspect that Microsoft or Bing is interested in trying to capture those details so they can then also perhaps work on some seller leads. So I think this is an incredibly significant development. Whereas you contrast that, if we go on to our classifieds, I actually think the search experience is clunky and outdated. If I put in the same search query here, 3-bed flat in Marylebone, well, guess what? No results. Why? Because Rightmove needs you to first list the specific town which you're in. You can't just blurt out, I want this bedroom flat here in this part of London. It's also very interesting that some of the suggestions they give. And then on the other side, I'm sure we have people here from Le Bon Coin. This is the starting search page for real estate on Le Bon Coin. So, very easy to get distracted. I think this is a telecoms ad, this is a NetJets ad. But again, if I write Paris Centre, where, of course, there are literally millions of homes, nothing comes up. Because, again, I'm not using the exact formulation which Rightmove, or in this case, Le Bon Coin wants me to use. So I think this is just out of date and I suspect users will find that it needs to change very quickly. Indeed, I think that AI-powered search will change the search experience. I think it'll make it more conversational and personal, more responsive, easier to consume, and more visual. By conversational, being able to write what we think, or to just speak, right? To use our voices to speak, I'm looking for this. Personal, because it's going to adapt to knowing more about me and coming up with what's relevant for me, right? More responsive in that as I start to interact with the results, it's going to work out, he's more interested in X than in Y. So look for those clues. Easy to consume. ChatGPT's been amazing at summarizing stuff. And by the way, ChatGPT is now accepting live data sources, so that's going to also further power ChatGPT. And then fourthly, visual. I think we forget that the next generation of property buyers, they don't start their searches on Google or Bing. They often start searches on TikTok and Instagram because they like the very visual format that it brings. So I think to continue to be successful, businesses will need to adapt rapidly. I think they're going to have to, go for these much more contextual, chatty requests with multiple variables, spacious detached house with high ceilings, etc., or upload a picture of the style of house you want, and then come up with homes which aren't just the same size and price bracket, but also in the similar style to what you're wanting. And to be kind to Rightmove, this example here, they've actually already started to enable you to highlight keywords like adjectives which you want to have in your listing, and I think here it was period house, so from a particular period, and with a view. Though it's also interesting that even here that the featured ad, which of course doesn't click any of those boxes, also for some reason is still on the top. I think when we get to discovery, again, AI will transform the discovery process. I still feel when I'm going through listings on, let's take somebody else on ImmoScout, it's a bit like reading a newspaper, just rooming through. And again, premium gets in the way of the perfect match. There's nothing reactive in the way I go through those results. When you get recommendations, they're usually based only on one or two criteria, whereas we're much more multi-factor, I think, in our preferences. And of course, the monetization requires me to click on lots of listings to generate leads to agents, because that makes the agents feel good about the subscriptions they're paying. So what's the future? The future of discovery is immersive, guided, and authenticated. Immersive, I love this idea of being able to put on my Meta-powered Ray-Ban glasses and eventually being able to look in the street and seeing which homes are for sale. Or what I've shown here is the more metaverse-style approach, which Indian firm Square Yards has applied in Dubai, where rather than project, so they're projecting, because Dubai's got full of high-rise, projecting projecting the results as they would look in a 3D landscape. I think the future of discovery will also be guided in the sense that, remember what we want is that the best agent is somebody who can show you properties which are exactly in line with what they want, because they know what you want. And I think that the combination of natural language processing, the quality of matching algorithms, will actually enable machines to do that far better than 99% of all agents. And that's going to happen soon. And then finally, authenticated. Obviously, generative AI will create a lot of fakes. Well, guess what? We need, obviously, to have the right technology to make sure that what the results come up are also authenticated. Monetization. AI will require classifieds to fundamentally rethink monetization. That's what I think. Let's face it, and hitherto, most revenue increases come from premium listings, moving people onto packages with more and more premium listings. But these, by definition, are skewing the results of the display process to feature less relevant matches. That's how it works. But of course, the search becomes more intuitive. You put more factors into what you're looking for. Premium is going to become less and less relevant. And the best portal gets, the best portals will be the ones which are faster at getting to you what you really, really want. But if you get faster what you really want, then premium's not going to sell. I mean, think of a dating site, right, where imagine if a dating site, you sign up and you're immediately sent a 10 out of 10 fit, and you get married and live happily ever after. They've made no money, right? So they need you to, first month, let's give Malcolm a match, which is like 6 criteria out of 10. Then maybe 2 or 3 months later, I get to the 7 or the 8 criteria out of 10. And then maybe month 6, I suddenly get served up the person that has that 10 out of 10 fit. That's a little bit an exaggeration, but it's sort of what's been happening, or what would need to happen for subscriptions still to be the best way of monetizing. So I think we're going to have to move to much more performance-based models. And here I show the Zillow Premier Agent. So it's not all Zillow customers, it's a subset of premium agents that are on a flex package where they are actually not paying a subscription at all, but they are sharing, you can see, around 30% of their commission with Zillow once the deal is done. I think that AI and other tech tools will empower the best resourced agents to raise quality at reduced costs. I've just put some logos here. There are a ton of people in this room, vendors, who are also AI-enabling platforms, and they will make brokers far more successful for those that can afford to make the investments. But similarly, marketplaces, who are also in this room, there's a whole plethora of AI-powered applications that you can take, which can then give you some of these capabilities like SEO optimization, image-based search, optimizing your valuation models, writing the listings with LLMs, and so on. So one final thought. If you don't do that, then you should remember what happened to Craigslist, right? So here in the middle, you have Craigslist, lots of nice rubrics. On the side, you have tens and tens of startups who, by being more focused and more transactional on very specific subsegments, have taken away of Craigslist revenues. So I think if you are slow to enhance that experience and slow to become transactional marketplaces, you run risking the same fate of Craigslist. That's all. Thank you.
Once again, fantastic presentation, Malcolm. Can we bring up the questions that are on the Hoover app?
Here we go.
If you guys can please also ask questions. Let's start first. How can companies solve the problem of commission sharing if there's no governing body like in the US, like the NAR? How do there it's easy. Everyone knows I share the commission. It's built into every day. How do you solve that problem?
So it's all about software, and I think it's there's a company here today called Real Advisor that's doing this in Switzerland. So every agent that's on the commission sharing program runs software so that every lead that comes in is automatically tracked by the software. So they just see what happens to the lead, and so they know when that, I'm talking about seller leads and buyer leads, so when the seller lead has turned into a sale, they know who's bought it, and they can show up for their commission. So I think the answer is it has to be done with intelligent software. I don't see why that's a deal breaker. I think that can happen.
And I guess also what happens is if I'm sharing leads on a commission share basis and you don't pay me,
you're not going to get any more.
You're not going to get any more leads. So it's this trust over time, building trust but verify, I guess the way to think about it.
I was going to say, no one's just going to do it on trust, but clearly the penalties for cheating are severe, especially if there are only a few main suppliers of buyer leads or seller leads.
Yeah. Now, Google Maps had real estate listings back in 2006. I know, because I was there in Australia. Went to do it, and I get the phone call that, hey, what are you going to do about this? Okay. Why is Bing going to be different? What is it that they are doing that's going to fundamentally change the game?
So, they're ambitious. The biggest change will be making search and discovery that much more enjoyable, but that only works if the underlying data is verified and of quality. And I think that will be the make or break. And that's why I think it's more likely that Bing will collaborate with portals who've already done the heavy work of the heavy work of verifying those listings. They're less likely to try and get the listings themselves, but I wouldn't rule it out. But until, that's been the main blocker or the main stumbling block. And also, I mean, Facebook Marketplace is the best example of what happens when you have unmoderated listings showing up in a marketplace.
I agree. And also, it's horses for courses in many ways. Yes. I mean, we can never forget the fact that 20, 25 years of brand building by the Rightmoves of the world, absolutely ingrained in everyone's psyche that Rightmove is the destination or the place to go for searching for property.
I mean, brand power, right? I mean, the top portals, ImmoScout, Rightmove, their brands are so powerful they're getting, 40, 50% direct traffic. But my concern is, if in their shoes, would be that will erode with time. And I think that Bing experience is so much more pleasant than trying to key out what you want on an old-fashioned text box in a Rightmove or an ImmoScout. I think it's something to be really wary of this time.
Okay. So if we follow that thought a bit,
Yep.
I want to tackle this question at the bottom here.
Yep.
Because if the brand is so powerful, 25 years of brand building in the United Kingdom, right move, how long do you think it will be before we see transactional marketplaces in mature markets?
So, of course, we should play on the word. What do we mean by transactional? I think there's the remuneration dimension, and there's the where is the transaction happening dimension. So, where is the transaction happening dimension? I think it's a win-win to start to find digital platforms where you can actually, the conveyancing platforms which will actually enable the main steps of title change, payment, and so on to happen digitally. I think the business models of sharing commissioning will happen, and they'll happen within a few years, because I just don't think premium is going to work anymore.
Yep. There's a question at the top, which is a bit more of a technical question about, is there a way for platforms to close their APIs to search engines in such a way that only the landing page itself is shown in the search results? And my question would be, why would you want to do that? Right? Because I think what you end up doing is you're still driving traffic and driving engagement, and it's not Bing forming the relationship with the advertiser. It's just another conduit to finding traffic.
So far that's been the exchange, right? You provide the content feed, I will make it more searchable. But if you look at what's been going on in jobs, I think that's where you should go to try and understand what could this do, because I think there is more risk of search happening within direct and staying on the search engine rather than simply being a conduit to then connect you back to the underlying site.
Okay. And then finally, you talked a lot about the buyer experience changing. What about the seller experience, and how will AI change that?
So the seller experience, there's two aspects. There's the seller leads experience, which is, I think, interesting enough, most portals have forgotten about seller leads. They've been so focused on buyer leads. I think that there's huge scope to structure and be better at providing seller leads. And there are a few companies around. So today, again, here, people like Real Advisor who've got very good at using AI to generate valuation models and to make seller leads convert much better into mandates through using software and data.
Okay. Fantastic. Malcolm, thank you very much, as always. A great presentation.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.